Welcome to the NASCAR DFS strategy show right here at Awesemo.com as we are here to break down now Monday's Food City Dirt Race. Appreciate everyone here on a Sunday afternoon as I got my guys Phil and Chris both with me here to break this one down for you. And I was over at Awesemo.com. I'm reading Phil's preview, and first time since 1970 that the NASCAR Cup Series has raced on dirt. So, Phil, let's just start there, man. How have you been kind of analyzing the race this week with it being on dirt?
Well, you know, God, this is such uncharted territory for the Cup Series. And you know, the trucks have been racing on dirt since 2013, ever since Tony Stewart purchased Eldora, and he outfitted it where they could race the trucks on it. But God, you know, comparing the trucks to the cars, they're kind of two different animals, and it's been a weird week for preparation because God, generally we at least have one race to look back at. And we've had nothing to look back at. So all we're going off of is, okay, well, maybe I can say this is what such and such driver did at Eldora, how many ever years ago. I can look at the betting odds on DraftKings Sportsbook. And it's just been a super tough week to try to get your arms around how you actually feel about this. Now, yeah, we did get some practice time on Friday, which was good to see. And I was really looking forward to these heat races on Saturday to give me some sort of inclination about how these drivers would react when actually racing against one another. But of course, it got rained out. So here we are doing our best to make educated guesses, but it feels like that's all we're doing in the end is just making guesses about this race tomorrow.
Chris, is that kind of the way you're at with this one, of just making some educated guesses?
That's the only thing we can really do this week, and that's the best way we can put it, really. Just to be honest, we are just purely making educated guesses with the information that we have. Like Phil mentioned, fortunately, we do have some practice numbers. I'm not sure how much those will translate to the actual race when they're actually racing each other, but it's at least nice to have. We can see how drivers have shifted in Vegas odds throughout the week, and like also Phil said, the Eldora numbers as well. So that's just some of the data points that we can look at this week.
Of course, we are sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. Head over to monkeyknifefight.com where you are in charge. They've got, whether you're looking for NBA, UFC, PGA, esports, soccer, or more, Monkey Knife Fight has it, as they are about player-based prop contests. And when you use the code Awesemo when you sign up, you get an instant first match deposit up to $50. Sign up today, as was in there last night with the UFC props, and I'm being there later on today with the NBA props. So be sure to take advantage of the offer they have for us when you use that promo code Awesemo. And of course, as always, appreciate everyone that's in here on a Sunday. If you're not subscribed to Awesemo here on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We have a lot of great programming for you each and every day. Of course, later on today, we'll have the NBA Deeper Dive and NBA Live for Lock. And baseball season is here, so we've got a ton of shows coming for you. So hit that notification bell so you know when a new show is live here on the channel. Be sure to hit a thumbs up. Let's look into roster construction, guys. First off, what is your thought process? And Chris, I'll start with you in terms of GPPs with roster construction.
So when it comes to GPPs, first off, I think today the safest route is to play the place differential guys. But since everyone's going to have that same thought process, those guys are going to have some pretty heavy ownership. So in tournaments, we're looking for those guys for pivots, and those are going to be the guys starting closer to the front. So I think looking at drivers, it might be a bit underpriced, like Martin Truex Jr., Joey Logano, those kind of guys that are a little bit too cheap, but did have some decent practice numbers that could pick up top 5, top 10 finishes. I think those are kind of the way to go in tournaments to get off of that heavy chalk that we're going to see from those place differential drivers.
Phil, what's your thoughts when it comes to GPPs?
God, I mean, depending on how this track holds up, because of course we've had tons of rain yesterday and today, so we're expecting the pack cars to go out there, run a bunch of laps to try to pack everything down. Then stuff will dry out tomorrow. We're going to get 150 laps from the truck series. So depending on what kind of condition this track is in, I mean, we could see a optimal lineup where it is just nothing but place differential because there's tons of wrecks. Nobody ever consistently stays out front. So the Dominator points just kind of get scattered throughout the field. And you see tons of guys cut down tires, spin out, and if you have to go to pit road, I mean, you're automatically 3 laps down. So it's going to kill a bunch of drivers if they just don't outright, hit the wall or end up killing their days. So I mean, we could see an optimal lineup that looks very close to Talladega or Daytona, or on the far end, we could see a 2 Dominator lineup where a couple of these guys that have the dirt track history get out front, stay out front, which is something that you easily can see at a dirt track, whereas a guy just gets out front and holds that position for a long time. So my lineups are going everywhere from just place differential to a single or a dual Dominator build.
Now, Phill, in terms of cash, is your mindset any different?
Oh yeah, for cash, it's nothing but place differential. If I have anybody starting closer than 20th place, it's Christopher Bell, just because I believe that he could lead enough laps to make value on that salary. But everybody else, it is 20th and beyond, just like we're back at Daytona.
What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. In cash games, you have to play those place differential drivers because we don't know really what to expect. And when you don't know what to expect, like at a track like Daytona and Talladega, we just try to minimize risk and roster those guys starting super far back. But in tournaments, I mean, we're going to probably see a Dominator or two, and we're going to want those guys in tournaments. Like Phill was mentioning, if we see the track maybe turn into maybe just a regular Bristol race, we can see one of those guys that do excel at Bristol end up leading up some laps and pick up some Dominator points. And we have 250 laps. So that's about close to 200 total Dominator points. So in tournaments, you do not want to disregard those Dominator points, but in cash games, I really don't think you're going to need them.
Chris, I'll start with you with this one. A question we got from Ryan over in the YouTube chat. Strategy for single entry.
So for single entry, it's going to lean towards a cash build, but since it's still a tournament, we're going to want to get a little bit different. So I'd recommend maybe taking a pivot or two, but mainly still focusing on place differential plays.
Phill, is that your same thought process?
Yeah, definitely. In single entry, I might even be willing to go with a second Dominator. But something I'm going to try to keep a track of is what the track looks like during the truck race, because how that track is playing out early in the day, I think is going to be a good indicator of what to expect in the afternoon. And if it does turn into the Dust Bowl that we saw on Friday during practice, that's going to affect how I leave my lineups.
In terms of Dominators, it's something we always talk about. Chris, on Live for Lock, we always talk about, in terms of Fantasy Cruncher, creating groups of how many Dominators you want. Phill, I know you wrote this week about, 2 Dominators, but Chris, what is your thoughts of, obviously hearing you talk about place differential being what we're looking for? What is your thoughts on Dominators?
Yeah, so Dominators this week, it's not something we talk about groups. I usually have a Dominator group. That is not something I'm doing this week because we have no past data on how a dirt race is going to work. And when that's the case, I want to restrict my lineups without really having the information to use to be able to restrict those lineups. Because at, in a mile and a half track, we're going to see typically 2 to 3 Dominators. It's a complete wild card. So I'm actually having 0 groups this week and just running the projections. And I think that's going to be a good mixture because you're going to probably get a couple of Dominators in some lineups, and then some lineups you'll get no Dominators. So I think it's actually good to have a mixture of kind of builds this week.
Phill, I mean, obviously you wrote about potentially 2 Dominators earlier this week on Awesemo.com. People can check out the article over there, but has your thought process changed?
I tell you what, if they were going to run this race tonight with just the slop and the slime that they dealt with yesterday, it would have been really hard to justify more than a single Dominator. And quite frankly, I really don't even. But this weekend, I really don't even want to use the term Dominator in the general sense that we're used to, because the guys that I'm looking at in that sense as a Dominator, I've only got 5 of them highlighted, and it's not like I'm just thoroughly expecting a guy like Bell or Larson, if he makes his way back through the field, any of these guys to just get to the lead and sit on the lead, gather those laps led, those fastest lap points. I really think that, like Chris said, if you are using Fantasy Cruncher this week, that you're playing with your ownership caps, you're playing with your randomness, you're playing with how many uniques per lineup, but don't go out of your way trying to force Fantasy Cruncher to give you a Dominator or two. If it happens because of projections, then so be it. But if your lineup ends up in a way where you have a bunch of these guys priced above 9K that are starting 20th or worse, and they're giving you points via their place differential and finishing position, that's going to work out fine too, because that paints a story in and of itself of the way that race plays out.
Of course, if you ever miss the strategy show, you can listen to it as part of the Awesemo podcast network. Just go to awesemo.com/podcast to get the links for the podcast that you are looking for. And be sure to leave a 5-star rating and review with your Twitter handle or email address for your chance to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. One winner will be awarded every Friday, and reviews are eligible to win up to 1 year. So always appreciate everyone that checks out our shows, a part of the Awesemo podcast network. Michael, appreciate you checking in. Congrats on winning 15K last night over in the UFC. Glad we were able to help you win some money there last night. I had an okay night. Wasn't night, Stipe losing the main event definitely hurt me a little bit because my best life had Stipe, but great that you were able to win last night. So guys, let's get into the salaries. We'll start in tier 1. So these are the drivers that are 10K and above over on DraftKings. Kyle Larson, of course, he is on the poll. Start 12,000 on DK. Christopher Bell 15th, 11,000. Tyler Reddick 27th. He's 10-5. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. 13th. He is 10-2. And someone's already asked a question about Kyle Larson for cash. So Phill, let's start with you. What's your take about Kyle Larson's high price tag on DK? What's your thoughts on him as a cash play?
Oh, if he wasn't having to go to the rear for this, for swapping out an engine because of overheating issues that he had in the second practice, then I could get behind that, because Larson's good enough that he could easily sail off into the turn 1, get a big lead, kind of like what we saw in the first truck heat race where Mike Millar started on the pole, just immediately went into that first turn, had like 4 or 5 car lengths on the next guy in front of him. And if they would have played the whole thing out, he just would have set sail. Unfortunately, like I said, Larson's going to the rear for this engine change. So his path to being optimal has been made that much tougher. You can't play Larson in cash in case something happens while he's trying to get his way to the front. Plus, with this $12,000 tag on DK, $14,000 on FanDuel, you need him to get back to the front and lead laps. He'll probably knock down fastest laps in the process of getting to the front, and it may not take him that long. Maybe 20 or so laps to get to the top 5. But you need him on DraftKings to lead some laps. Whether we're talking cash or tournaments, you play Larson because you see the race probably breaking this way, is that initially with all 39 cars on the track, there's going to be wrecks. They're going to try to go into turn 1. Someone's going to make a mistake. Multiple people are going to make mistakes, and it's going to bunch up, and we're going to have to restart. And this process is probably going to play itself out a couple of times until everybody plays nice. And then beyond that, we've got a competition caution at lap 50, and then we've got a stage break at lap 100. So all of these things are in place to help Larson get to the front quicker. Once Larson gets there, he needs to lead laps. So your playing Larson depends on how quickly do you think he can get to the front, and just how long does he stay out there with guys like Bell, Stenhouse, Dillon, and the like behind him.
Chris, what's your thoughts about Kyle Larson there?
Yeah, beforehand, when we didn't know that he was going to the rear, I would have thought he was a pretty good play in cash games, even though there is no place differential upside, and I am hunting place differential. But the thing is, like Phill was mentioning, he can very easily get caught up in a wreck. Maybe not his own fault, but if some random driver that doesn't have much dirt experience happens to mess up and take Kyle Larson out, you can gain fantastic leverage in tournaments. So I'm obviously not a big fan at all of Kyle Larson in cash games. In tournaments, it's still interesting because he can make his way back up front. But even then, I'd still rather play a guy like Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick, who I feel like have similar finishing position upside. Maybe they wouldn't dominate as much as Kyle Larson, but they don't have to go to the rear, and they're starting way farther back. So they're just so much more appealing to me. And plus, they're a lot cheaper as well. So I definitely can't do Kyle Larson in cash games today.
The one name you didn't mention there, Chris, was Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who is pretty much bare minimum in terms of what we're seeing ownership wise. 10,002 on DK, 8,800 on FanDuel. Over on Super Draft, 1.4 multiplier and a 2.1 as the champion. So what is your thoughts about Ricky? And obviously very low ownership right now.
Yeah, so he does have a dirt background, and that's why DraftKings priced him up like that. The reason he's going to be so low owned is because of who he's priced around. We have Chase Briscoe starting super far back in 25th, Reddick in 27th, and you have Bell and Larson right above him. Then you have dirt track ringers like Austin Dillon and Friesen, who are starting far back as well. Austin Dillon's not really starting that far back. But anyway, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., people aren't going to want to play him above $10,000. So I don't mind him as a tournament pivot. I know he has no Odor numbers, but he does have a dirt background. His odds aren't terrible. He's sitting at 14th in the Vegas odds to win this race, which obviously isn't that great. But if you're looking for leverage in tournaments or qualifiers, Stenhouse is going to be that forgotten kite because everyone is playing the guys priced around him.
Phill, what's your take on Ricky Stenhouse Jr.?
Yeah, Stenhouse is a guy that I would outright consider as a dominator this week. He can easily get to the front, and quite frankly, I'm expecting either Hamlin or Blaney to lead, let's say, the first 15 or 20 laps, but then after that, I think it's going to come down to, out of Dillon, Bell, and Stenhouse, which one gets to the front first. And whoever gets to the front first is probably your best bet to lead the rest of the laps until the competition caution. Like Chris said, salary wise here on DraftKings, he's in an odd spot because everyone around him seems to have better prospects because of place differential or who they are as a driver, or quite frankly, even you could argue for better equipment. That $8,800 price tag on FanDuel, it's a little easier to stomach, but then, once again, starting 13th, there just isn't that much place differential to milk out of him. I do think that you are going to need some sort of additional Dominator points. You may not need a bunch from Stenhouse this week, but you're going to need something out of him in order for him to be optimal.
Jacob asking us about Christopher Bell, 11,000 on DraftKings, 13,500 on FanDuel. Phill, I'll start with you. What's your thoughts on Christopher Bell as a play this week?
If you want to start a lineup with him in cash, either site, fully behind that. He's got some place differential to get you by, but beyond that, he should be one of the top lap leaders for the race tomorrow. He opened up with the second best odds at plus 500. We all know the dirt background, 3-time winner of the Chili Bowl there in Tulsa. He's got practically everything that you could want out of him. He's got a past Eldora win back in 2015. He checks off every box that you're looking for this week as far as expensive drivers with dirt history. And yeah, if you want to start off your cash lineup with him, if you want to start off your tournament lineup with him in lieu of Kyle Larson, or heck, if you want to play the two of them together, I've got some of those lineups, where you're expecting those guys to lead the majority of lineups. Really like Bell this week.
Of course, MLB season is just around the corner, just a couple of days away, as opening day is on Thursday of this week, and we have a deal for you. Get your first 9 days of Awesemo Plus MLB for only $9 when you use the promo code STARTING9. That's starting with the number 9. That gives you access to everything we have to offer for MLB DFS, including player projections, ownership projections, top stacks, lineup builder, our premium Slack channel, and so much more. This offer is valid through April the 9th. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Moving on to tier number 2. These will be the drivers that'll be in the 8K and 9K range. And a driver that's already been brought up, and there's a question about him. So and this is from Wyatt. Let's start off with Austin Dillon, 9,700 DraftKings, 10,000 on FanDuel. Chris, let me start with you about your overall take about Austin Dillon as a play.
So I really like him in tournaments today. I know a lot of people are going to side with Friesen and Chase Briscoe, who he's priced right in between because of that place differential upside. But Austin Dillon is very good at dirt tracks. He has plenty of experience. And I believe I read that he was 3 for 3 in wins heading in Bristol at some dirt races he ran in here. So I'm really liking Austin Dillon. Now, the thing is why people might be scared here, if they're looking at the practice numbers, he did not put up good numbers whatsoever. But I am not really willing to look into that too much. I feel like he was just kind of saving equipment and kind of sandbagging it a bit. And Austin Dillon is a threat to dominate. I believe that's what Phill was mentioning earlier, and I can totally get on board with that. Now, the one thing I'll mention, his odds went from 1,200 up to 2,500 now at the 12th best. But I'm feeling like DraftKings did kind of look too much into practice there. I think Austin Dillon's I'm not sure if he's going to be super sneaky, but if he is going to be lower owned than he should, I really like being overweight on him in tournaments.
Another driver we were talking about right before the show was Denny Hamlin, 9,100 DK, 11,500 on FanDuel. Phill, what's your thoughts about Denny Hamlin here?
Things are kind of breaking the way that Denny needs them to break. If this race is going to play out like I'm seeing it play out, thanks to the track drying out, you get all the rubber built into the track from the truck race, and then 250 laps from the Cup race itself. You could very well see this dirt race just become a slower version of Bristol itself. And if that's going to happen, well, then guys like Denny Hamlin should be on my board with that starting position. He's got pretty good Bristol history. He won the fall 2019 race. Now that's going to be somewhat different weather conditions. That was a race that ended at night, but still, Hamlin's done pretty well here at Bristol. Pretty good short track driver in his own right. So I think that, you know, what you need from Hamlin is for this track to just really dry out and just build up a bunch of rubber so that it becomes just a slower version of itself, and that'll play into Hamlin's hands. Now, if this is just a typical dirt race, then I think that really does hurt the prospects of Hamlin. But when you look at his practice speeds from Friday, when the track was drier, he was putting down top 5, top 10 speeds, whether you're looking at long runs or short runs.
Looking at some other drivers here, you know, Chris, I got to bring up your boy, Ryan Blaney, 9,300 DK, 12,500 on FanDuel.
I knew that was coming. But going on top of what Phill was saying, if it did happen to go into like a slower version of Bristol, I know Ryan Blaney doesn't have the greatest finishes there because he happens to wreck out, it seems like, every single time we go to Bristol. But he's one of those guys that's usually up front picking up fast laps and laps led. Now, he's going to have the preferred lane to start the race, but he won't have the control on the start of the race. That'll be Denny Hamlin with Kyle Larson going to the rear. But there's a decent shot of him being able to lead some laps early on. But like Phill was mentioning, I think those dirt track guys are going to come up quick, like Austin Dillon, Christopher Bell, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. So I'm not sure if it's going to be enough laps for him to dominate, because where he's starting in third, I know the price is nice at $9,300, but if he doesn't dominate a lot, and if he just gets a top 5 finish, yeah, that's fine. But I don't think it's going to be a great day on DraftKings compared to all the other place differential guys we have. But his practice numbers, I believe he was 10th in the 10-lap average in practice number 2, which is not that bad. He's got the 6th best odds in Vegas to win the race. Same exact as Denny Hamlin as well. And his odds have gone in his favor throughout the week. So I feel like he's a pretty similar play to Denny Hamlin, although I do prefer Hamlin over Blaney.
We have talked about throughout this show about place differential, which leads us to our next driver. That'd be Chase Elliott, 8,700 on DK, 13,000 on FanDuel. So no difference between the two slates. Phill, what's your thoughts on Chase Elliott?
Not having the dirt track history of the rest of these guys that we've talked about, it's concerning. But with this track supposedly drying out, I think that will play into Elliott's hands, that this could just be more of a typical race, and he's not going to have to be fighting the track every lap. He's starting 26th. He's priced down because he got, without that dirt history, he got priced down by DraftKings. Now at FanDuel, he's still 13,000, but with starting 26th, he's going to get place differential. You look at the practice times, definitely has a fast car. It looks like all of the Hendrick cars are going to be particularly fast this weekend. Chase is a guy that definitely want to play in cash, and quite frankly, at that 8,700 price tag on DraftKings, it's hard to get away from him in tournaments as well.
Looking at some other drivers in here, Kyle Busch, 8,900, 12,000 on FanDuel. Chris, what's your take?
I think he's one of the better tournament plays in the slate. And like we were talking earlier, I hate to go back on this, but if it turns into a slower version of Bristol, Kyle Busch is the guy at Bristol. We didn't have practice last year, and we talk about how Kyle Busch sucked without practice, but he was still good in both those Bristol races without practice. So I definitely think there's opportunity for him to dominate. He was pretty fast in practice. He was top 10 in practice number 2 in the 10-lap average. I know practice 1, I believe, wasn't as great as that, but he's got some decent odds for this race. And like I said, he had practice under his belt this week, which is always going to work in Kyle Busch's favor. I know he's not the biggest dirt guy in the world, but I actually think he's a decent tournament play for that price point.
Phil mentioned a question that we have in chat saying, is Bubba Wallace sneaky play? 8,500 on DK, 9,200 on FanDuel.
He very well could be. The number that keeps getting tossed around about Bubba is that he won the 2014 Eldora race. He actually beat out Kyle Larson in that race. But quite frankly, ever since then and this Bristol dirt race, I can't find any other dirt races in Bubba's history. I mean, Bubba got hooked up running asphalt, running concrete here in NASCAR for Kyle Busch and the Truck Series, running for, I believe it was Jack Roush in the 60 car until the money ran out on that ride, and then found his way into the 43 and now this ride. So his focus has been just normal road pavement racing and not dirt racing. So he's been able to return to something that he's comfortable with. That first practice session, he was 25th in his best single lap run, 27th in this 5-lap run, and then 33rd in the 10-lap run. But it looks like they went back, made some changes. He started to get progressively better in the second practice session. He ran the 7th best 20-lap run. So perhaps, getting back in the truck, getting back in the car, he was able to fine tune, get back to what he understands, perhaps, get some muscle memory about what he used to do on dirt tracks, relay that to his crew chief, and they were able to pick up some speed on the track. So starting 19th, he's got some place differential. He's a little priced up on both sides, but that'll keep people away from him. And that's a guy that I want to be looking at in tournaments.
Chris Austin, I appreciate you in the super chat. Phil, he has got a question for you. It's a question that's come up. Everyone wants to know what's in the binders.
Here's what happens when you're the only IT person for your company. You become the forgotten man. Nobody gives you an office, and you get stuck upstairs with all of the binders that have to stick around for 7 years. So that's what's going on.
I always said, man, it's just he's got track history from 20 years ago. That's all those binders are.
Yeah.
But Chris, I appreciate you there in the super chat. Mention a question from Wyatt. Stuart Friesen, 32nd, 9,500 on DK, 8,500 over on FanDuel, and asking about the equipment and how well does he finish. And Chris, we'll go with you with that one.
So the thing is with these dirt track ringers, like they're obviously in good spots for place differential because we didn't have the heat races, and obviously their team owner points are not going to be that high up. So they're in really good spots for fantasy this weekend. The problem is they're all in some pretty bad equipment. Now, Friesen, out of all of them, he's in the best, I would say, in the 77 car. This is what Justin Haley's been driving. He's actually been able to put up some decent finishes. And the thing about Friesen, he's a very good dirt track racer. We can look at the Eldora numbers. He's the most recent winner in Eldora. The practice numbers, we didn't really get too much from him. I don't think he had any 10-lap averages, which is unfortunate, but I wouldn't look into it too much because I think he should be able to handle himself on a dirt track. The problem is, like I said, the ceiling is a bit limited because he's not in the best equipment. It's not like he's in a Hendrick car or a Penske car. So I feel like we might be capped around that top 15 upside because the odds in Vegas, he opened up, I believe he was almost inside the top 5. He has now dropped to the 15th best odds to win the race. So that's obviously not a great thing to, when you're going backwards like that. But even then, if he can contend for a top 15 finish, we're talking like 15, 20 spots place differential. He's not a bad play, but I wouldn't say he's like a guaranteed lock or anything, even though with all that dirt track experience he has.
Phil, there's 3 other drivers we haven't talked about in this tier. That'd be Joey Logano, Kevin Harvick, and Martin Truex Jr. What's your take on these trio of drivers?
Logano is kind of maybe, if you're doing 20 max or if you're doing 150 max, he's a guy that you throw in there just because he might sneak out a top 10. Once again, we're going back to the Bristol corollary that if this can turn into an actual Bristol race, then that'll probably play into Logano's hands. And Harvick's been so here. Truex, I think this has been like his worst short track out of all the places that he runs. It's really kind of odd how just bad he's been here throughout his history. But Logano is just one of those plays where you're just like, okay, give me a top 10. That's all I need from you. He doesn't have any dirt track history whatsoever. I think the same thing is basically what we found out about Harvick and Truex. Harvick and Truex, they're starting a little too far forward. Yes, they're discounted, but I don't see them maintaining their position. Logano's the only one out of these three that I've kind of got my fingers crossed open. Maybe he can do it.
Of course, when you join Awesemo Plus, you join a community. The tools and projections are great, but you also gain access to our premium Slack channel where you can talk strategy and other topics with fellow DFS players, participate in office hours with our Awesemo experts to stay up to date with the latest updates and projections from Alex Awesemo Baker himself. It's a favorite feature for many of our subscribers and an added perk to any Awesemo Plus package. You see it right there on the screen. Sign up for a Awesemo Plus pass. And if you just want that NASCAR weekly pass, you can sign up there. Just go to awesemo.com/join or right at on the main page on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see Awesemo Plus. Click on that. You can sign up for your Awesemo Plus membership. And as I always recommend, be sure to add Fantasy Cruncher to your account. That is going to help you out a ton. Now, moving on to the tier number 3, this will be the drivers that are in the 6 and 7K range. So we got Kyle Busch, Alex Bowman, Brad Keselowski, Chris Windom, Mike Millar, William Byron, Ryan Newman, Shane Golbeck, Matty D, Ty Dillon, JJ Yelly, Chris Buescher, and Ryan Preece. I know we've got a couple questions on drivers in this tier. So Chris, I'll start with you with your take on William Byron.
So he's one of those guys where I think he'll be okay for the price range that he's in. But the problem is he's starting so far up front. I really don't think I don't really see him moving up. I think those dirt track guys are going to pass him. Could he contend for a top 10, top 12? Yes, but that means he's going to lose spots. And with all the place differential guys we have on this slate, it's really hard to justify wanting to play too much William Byron. Now, he was 7th in the 10-lap average in practice too, which is nice. But even I know he won the iRacing Bristol dirt race, which I'm not going to put any stock into. And I think his odds shifted because of that, which I don't really understand. But I mean, he's not the worst play in the world because of the price, but I'm not a big fan.
Phill, looking at some other drivers that we got some questions on. Alex Bowman, 7,700 on DK, 8,200 on FanDuel.
Yeah, hey, we've got somebody here besides the dirt ringers that actually has a dirt track history. So that's definitely encouraging. You're not going to find any Eldora history with Bowman, but by this point, from 2013 through 2019, he had been floating around both the Cup and the Xfinity Series. So he doesn't have that in his resume, but just realize that there is plenty of dirt track history in his back pocket. You look at the first session, he had the first or the fastest single lap run, third fastest in the 5-lap run, second fastest in the 10-lap run, and then fourth fastest in the 15-lap run. That carried over in the second practice. He had a little bit of a blip in the 5-lap run where he was 19th. Maybe he got caught up in traffic, but then when you look at his 10-lap run, it was back to the 5th fastest. This is a bet on horsepower. This is a bet on history. Bowman's in that same spot that Byron is. He's starting so far forward that you need him to maintain position. And maybe with that dirt track history that isn't being accounted for this week, maybe he's a sneaky bet to knock down some fastest laps and maybe even ascend to the lead. But you can't play him. You can't play him in cash. But he's gonna be a ride or die play in tournaments. That's either going to make your day or sink your day.
Chris, when one of the drivers, actually the driver in this year that's getting the most ownership and getting one of the highest ownership on this slate is Kurt Busch at 7,800 on DK, 7,000 over on FanDuel. Is he a core play for you?
Yeah, he's actually one of my core plays, especially in cash games. I think it'd be kind of silly to want to fade Kurt Busch in cash games. I like him in tournaments as well because that price point, it's just really hard to pass up, especially on FanDuel. He's even cheaper over on FanDuel, and I thought he was already cheap over on DraftKings. So I'm definitely all about Kurt Busch. He was 8th in the 10-lap in practice number 2 and 8th in the 15-lap as well. Practice 1, he didn't run past 10 laps. He was 17th in the 10-lap practice 1 and 18 in the 5-lap. So he got better in practice number 2, which I do like to see. Now his odds in Vegas, they're not that great, 17th to win, but starting all the way back in 28th, Kurt Busch is a guy that can certainly contend for a top 15 finish. Plus, if it happened to turn into like a slower Bristol race, Kurt Busch, this is a pretty good track for him as well. So I'm really having a hard time getting away from Kurt Busch in all formats.
Phill, you mentioned about these, dirt ringers that are being brought into this race. Do you like them for cash?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could play all of Wyndham. I'm still I don't know how I feel about Mike Millar. He's in Timmy Hill's ride in the 66, and I never trust that ride because mechanically it always feels like it's always destined to finish 50 laps down. Who knows how much extra funding Mike Millar's brought into this? I believe that Millar has got sponsorship by Auto Parts for Less. I don't even know if that's a real company, but he's got the talent. He's a guy that you can look to in the truck race. But as far as this cup race, I'm kind of scared about him. You go down to Shane Globo Jim, however you pronounce that last name. He is in the 78 for Live Fast. That's BJ McLeod's ride. That's a ride that I trust a bit more. Wyndham, like I said, he's in the 15 for Rick Ware. Generally, that's the worst Rick Ware car, but that thing has full sponsorship from NOS Energy this week, so it's probably gotten just a little bit more R&D and performance into it this week. But yeah, Wyndham, Shane G, we'll just call him Shane G. And then you can go down to Ty Dillon, who's got dirt track history. We kind of question that car, the 96 Gaunt Brothers Racing. And then you've got JJ Yaley, who's either in the 51 or 53 this week, but he's got plenty of dirt track history in his back pocket. These are all guys that you can mix and match or play together in cash.
Ty Dillon is one of the drivers that we're projecting around, just about 20% here. So Chris, what's your thoughts about Ty Dillon?
So I will say the one thing is he's in the lawnmower car from last year. Like I mentioned with Daniel Suarez, I said every week he's in a super bad car. The 96 car is pretty slow, but the thing is equipment's not going to matter as much at a dirt track that it would like at a 1.5 mile track. I know it's not the greatest, but I think we can definitely trust Ty Dillon. The thing with Ty Dillon is he can't lose you any points. No other driver can say that for you this week. And if we think there's going to be a lot of attrition and carnage, he's pretty much in the best spot here, and he's really cheap at $6,600. And looking at the Eldora numbers, he's ran the most laps out of all these drivers. He has 5 races, average finish of 10.8 there. Ty Dillon, assuming he just doesn't like the first guy that wrecks or something, he should be in a pretty good spot. I have a hard time seeing him disappoint you.
Earlier on the show, we got a question about Ryan Newman starting 14, 6,900 on DK, 5,000 on FanDuel. Phill, what's your thoughts about Ryan Newman in this race?
Starting 14th is probably going to scare a fair amount of people off. And Newman lost his spot in the truck race since they had to go to the formula. And Newman's ride didn't have a guaranteed spot thanks to the formula. So you can look at it one of two ways. You can say, well, he's not going to have that track time, so I really don't like that. But then he doesn't have 150 laps tiring him out either, so he'll be fresh for this race. He's a guy, plenty of dirt track history. He's ran at Eldora before. It wasn't a good finish back in 2018, finishing 30th, but he's got plenty of dirt track history. The practice numbers, they're better than what you would expect for this Roush car. 12th, 14th, and 19th in the single, the 5 and the 10 lap run in the first session. And then you go to the second session, it was 22nd, 17th, and 11 in those same 3 different lap runs. So he's got, it appears that he's got plenty of speed. You need a top 10 finish from Newman. And the thing that we know about Newman, he is a heck of a blocker. And if he can get to the top 10, he'll probably do a good job of keeping people behind him so he can maintain that spot.
Another driver I want to mention here before we move on to the next tier is a driver that typically when we're talking about him, he's priced in the 9 and 10K range, and that's Brad Keselowski starting 20th, 7,500 on DK, 9,700 on FanDuel. Chris, what's your take?
It's one of the things with Keselowski this week. I was first looking at the slate, I think I kind of overlooked that he was this cheap at $7,500. I know he's not like a big dirt track guy, and that's kind of why he's priced that low, but his practice numbers weren't that bad. He was able to put up some top 15 numbers, was 7th in the 5 lap in practice 2, then inside the top 15 in both the 10 lap and 15 lap. So I don't hate the price point on Keselowski. Do I think he's going to be a guy that can come out and win the race and dominate? I do not, but you don't need that at this price point. And starting back in 20th, I mean, he should be good for a top 15 contention. Plus, he's pretty good at Bristol if this happened to turn into a slower version of Bristol. So I'm playing Keselowski just because of the price point, really.
course, be sure to subscribe to Awesemo right here on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you know when a new show is live here on the channel. Of course, we have shows for you each and every day. Of course, coming here later on today, 5 o'clock Eastern time will be NBA Deeper Dive. And of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. That really does help us out. But make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you know when a new show is live here on the channel, so you know to help develop your lineups. Now let's move on to tier number 4. This will be drivers that are underneath 6K. We'll start with a driver that we got a question from Stan about, and that is Eric Amarola, starting 23rd, 5,800 on DK, 4,500 on FanDuel. Phil, what's your thoughts?
I ended up with Almirola in my fantasy crunches, and I exited him out and took him out. I know that he's cheap here at this price point, and he's got a little bit of a floor with that place differential, but there's no dirt track history. His speed is so, but quite frankly, you could say that about everybody at Stewart-Haas this year. It feels to me like Almirola is a guy that's going to start 23rd and finish 23rd, and at 5,800, I can probably get better value by just going down the board.
Mention a question. I'll go to Chris for you for this one, where Wyatt said, how much Alfredo and LaJoie is too much? And Corey LaJoie is seeing some decent ownership.
It's going to depend on how your builds are. If you're going to have a lot of exposure to those guys like Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, Tyler Reddick, then you're going to have to dig down there more than you would if you're going towards more balanced builds. I personally probably wouldn't want to get past like 25% on those guys. I like where they're starting. I like their price points, but it's just going to depend on how much exposure you have to those really expensive drivers.
Another driver that we're seeing get some ownership, Chris, I'll start with you here. That's Cole Custer.
Yeah, I like the price point on Cole Custer quite a bit. He's only $5,500, starting in 21st. The thing is, in practice, he kind of was doing worse numbers than where he's starting. He's mainly just a price play, and I don't have really any strong stances on these guys starting really far back. Or I'm not sorry, starting really far back, starting in this price range, I should say. In practice 1, though, I will say Cole Custer actually put up some really good times. He was 5th in the 10 lap in practice 1 and 2nd in the 15 lap as well. Got worse in practice number 2, but if he can even just kind of meet somewhere in the middle there, that's price point, contend for a top 20, top 15 finish at only $5,500. I do think that makes them somewhat playable.
Phil, we always kind of talk about this lower tier of how many do you want to go down to? You know, is it one max of that you feel comfortable putting in your lineups?
Yeah, I think in most lineups that you're really just wanting exposure to one of LaJoie, one of Suarez, one of Alfredo, maybe even going all the way down to Health. Although I will say I have messed with some lineups and I ended up with a double punt just because I was trying to get exposure to the high price place differential guys plus a Dominator or two. So I ended up with a LaJoie and Alfredo lineup. And quite frankly, at their salaries, I don't need that much out of them thanks to where they start.
Of course, if you do have any questions for the guys, be sure to line that up right now in our premium Slack account or also here on YouTube. We will get to those here momentarily. Looking at some other drivers in terms of here, Michael McDowell is someone that it seems like we get questions about him pretty much every show. 5,200 on DraftKings. What's your thoughts, Chris?
So similar to Cole Custer, he had a better practice 1 than he had at practice 2. Looking at his odds to win in Vegas, he's sitting at 23rd, and we have no door numbers either. Again, some of these guys are just playing because of the price points. If we're expecting a bunch of chaos back here, if some of them slip through the cracks, they'll be decent pump plays. Because I don't really have any strong stances on these guys, maybe besides, like the Cole Custers, Anthony Alfredos, and the Corey LaJoies. Outside of that, you're just kind of mixing and matching for the most part. McDowell's got top 15 upside. His odds actually shifted 5,000 in his favor. I know he's still at 10,000 to win, but it's still something in the right direction for McDowell.
Of course, March Madness is here, and we have got you covered at Awesemo. If you're looking to get in some March Madness DFS. You can access our college basketball DFS projections with an Also Plus Platinum Pass, or you can purchase our March Madness DFS package separately for only $9.95, which gives you access to our projections for the rest of the tournament. You can also check out Odd Shopper tool at oddshopper.awesemo.com to help you find the best tourney betting lines available across all major sports books legal here in the United States. Finding the best value on a line could be the difference between a win or a loss, so make sure to take advantage of that free tool that we are offering over at awesemo.com. Go oddshopper.awesemo.com. As I mentioned, if there's any questions that you have for the guys, be sure to line those up. We'll start off with Gabby saying, with a lack of track history on a dirt track and most of the drivers not having much dirt racing experience, would you open your exposure to more drivers to keep your driver pool limited with a core? Phill, let's start with you.
That's what I did. I took kind of a similar approach to what I did at Atlanta last week, where I lowered my maximum exposure cap, and that just naturally increased my player pool. And I think if I was looking correctly, of course, there were a bunch of guys on FanDuel that I marked out just because they started so far forward, but I think I ended up with exposure in 150 max to at least 25 or 28 drivers out of our 39. So yeah, I mean, there's just so much unknown in regards to the drivers and the way that the track is gonna play out, that I want to try to hit so many different scenarios that I possibly can, depending on what happens.
Chris, what's your take?
Totally agree. And I was actually looking at my crunches. I was creeping into the 30s for drivers use as well. That may be a bit extensive. You're not going to do that in 20 max, but if you're doing 150 lineups, I mean, you can really open up your player pool. Maybe besides maybe a couple drivers where you just don't absolutely want to play, which I'm going to do as well. But opening up, because we can have some really good educated guesses here, but that's all it is right now because we have no track data. We do have some practice numbers, but the track is going to be changing. So even then we can't fully bank on them. So I really like the idea of just opening up your exposures and just kind of letting it fly, to be honest.
Jeff asks, anybody starting up front that you like for cash? Chris, let's start with you, man.
The only guys I would consider for cash starting up front, and even then I don't really want to go that route, but if I have to answer that, I like Denny Hamlin. I think he could be the guy that leads the laps early on, either him or Ryan Blaney. But like I said earlier, I'm going to side with Denny Hamlin in that situation, also like Kyle Busch. And the thing with Truex is I like him in tournaments, but he is pretty cheap and he does have a little more place differential upside than the other guys we talked about, but his practice numbers are actually very good. And the Joe Gibbs cars as a whole were pretty impressive in practice, kind of right behind Team Hendrick. So this is some of the guys you could consider, maybe like an Alex Bowman or Austin Dillon as well.
What's your take, Phill?
On FanDuel, the farthest forward that I would go would be Christopher Bell starting 15th, because, you know, ultimately I want exposure to place differential. I can foresee a race where the laps led just gets split up so many different ways because of all of the cautions that we're guaranteed to have, and then the cautions that could happen due to wrecks and spin outs and what have you. So on FanDuel, the furthest forward I would start would be Christopher Bell starting 15th. On DraftKings, I really do think that if you've got anybody starting further forward than maybe Chase Briscoe, then you're adding in some variants that you probably don't want.
Phill, let's start. This is one or the other: Kurt Busch or Chase Elliott.
If you're forcing me to play one of these two, then I guess I'm going to go with Kurt Busch, just simply because he's cheaper. They both basically offer the same place differential. The one thing I will say is I can foresee Kurt just going out there, running his race, not trying to get too aggressive, knowing that he doesn't have any chance to win this sucker, and playing the steady Eddie game and bringing home a top 10 just because he keeps his nose clean, where Chase might get a little racy if he's in the position late in the race and might try to do something to put himself in the catbird seat that could end up, unraveling a good day.
Chris, what's your thoughts?
I personally like Chase Elliott a little bit more from a projection standpoint, but those are my two of my favorite cash game plays. So I don't really like having to pick between those two, but just to be a little bit different from Phill, I'll say Chase Elliott, but like seriously, two of some of the best plays today, in my opinion.
Is MDB a fade? Thoughts, Chris?
He's one of the drivers I barely have any of. He's just not popping up too much for me. I know he does have some dirt background, but the thing is, starting 12th, the guys he's kind of around, I just feel like it's more place differential and more opportunities for more fantasy points because he's right in between Shane G, we'll call him, and then Ty Dillon, JJ Yaley. So it's kind of hard for me to get on him compared to those other guys.
I had to take a moment when I saw the name on the sheet for Shane. I was like,
I'm still not sure.
Shane G, I'm good with going with that route. Phill, what's your thoughts about MDB as a fade?
Yeah, it's that starting position. It's everybody placed around him, regardless of what site you're looking at. He's a guy that I don't have any exposure to on either site.
Phill, thoughts on Ryan Preece for tournaments?
Preece is very interesting. A few guys were willing to go to the high line during practice. That's where we saw Tyler Reddick hanging out. Go figure. That's where we saw Kyle Larson hanging out. And that's one of the even crazier things is that Larson went to the higher groove, which is typically the slower groove, and he was still knocking down the fastest lap times. Just it's crazy just how good he is and how much better he should be than the rest of the field at this. But the other guy was up there was Preece. And even though he was up there in that slower groove, Preece was mimicking what Larson and Reddick were doing, and he was knocking down pretty good times. Who knows just how much time he's had to prepare for this, talking with Ricky Stenhouse Jr., his teammate, but maybe Stenhouse is passing along a few pointers, helping his car setup wise. And if that's going to spill over from Stenhouse into Preece, then yes, definitely on board with Preece.
Do you like Ryan Preece for tournaments, Chris?
And the one thing I was going to mention that Ryan Preece actually had the best odd shift in Vegas this weekend. So I guess they liked what they saw in practice. And I do like Ryan Preece at that price point of $6,000.
Tony asks, what guys would you take out of your pool on DraftKings? Chris, we'll start with you.
Matt DiBenedetto is a candidate for that. I'd hate to say to completely take a guy out of the player pool at a random track like this, but Matt DiBenedetto, I'm not sure I'd go as far as Eric Almirola. I know Phill doesn't like him. I don't love him, but I still think I'm going to have a little bit of him. But guys like Ross Chastain, maybe Daniel Suarez, I like the price point, but he's starting 18th. I know he put a lot of practice down, but guys like that, really.
Phill, anyone you're taking out?
It's Harvick. It's Truex Jr., definitely Matty D. And then, really kind of once you get to that 62 and possibly Buescher starting 11th. But I mean, once you get beyond that, the guys get cheaper in their path to making value, much less being optimal. It's that much easier. Here at the very bottom, though, I will say I don't want any part of Josh Bilicki. I don't want any part of Cody Ware.
Wyatt would like to know, does JJ Yeley have dirt track experience?
Yeah, I think whenever he gets the opportunity, he always runs in the Chili Bowl up here. He's got plenty of dirt history, and that's why DraftKings priced him up to 6,400 this week.
Chris, max amount you should leave on the table in a DraftKings GPP.
So it can get a little bit interesting this week because those dirt track ringers that are starting in the back, you can pick up Wyndham, Millar, and you can get Shane G there. They're all around that 7-6K range. And if you want to throw in some other guys, then place differential like Chase Elliott, Kurt Busch, that's what, like 5 drivers. Those guys aren't super expensive. So if you want to get a little bit crazy, you can do that. Now, the majority of my lineups, I want to use guys like Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, Chase Briscoe. It's just if you're going for those straight up, like very in the back place differential plays, you can make some lineups with some salary on the table, but it's not something I'm really trying to do this week.
Phill, what's your take about how much money can be left on the table?
Yeah, I mean, if we're approaching this like a semi super speedway race, then salary is no object, especially on FanDuel. And this has really been a trend this year is that the optimal lineups have been leaving tons of money on the board practically every week, and that's definitely going to carry over this week.
Of course, the truck race will be before the NASCAR race tomorrow, and I know Johnny Rose over in our Slack channel was asking about, he says, who do we love and who do we hate?
If you have the race sheets, They're pinned in the Slack chat. If you can't find them, just crawl my Twitter timeline. You will find a link to them. There's 3 pages. There's the Cup Super Sheet. There's a Bristol's numbers sheet in case this turns into a typical Bristol race. And then there's a Truck Super Sheet. There you'll see drivers highlighted according to Dominator plays, GPP plays, and cash plays. And because they had to go by the formula this week because the heat races got rained out, you've got all of the ringers basically starting in the back. You've got Kyle Larson starting 28th. You've got Bubba Wallace starting 32nd. You've got Chase Briscoe starting 33rd. You've got Mike Millar, who I not so high on in the Cup race, but I do like in the truck race. He's starting 38th. You know, this is looking kind of like the Cup race where you can do maybe one guy up at the front and then just pick your guys in the back.
What's your thoughts on the truck race, Chris?
Well, my thoughts for the truck race is I usually defer to Phill. So I'm going to totally agree with what you said right there. I'm just not too big in the lower series, but it's going to be a similar strategy for me. And especially because they're going to be the first ones down there, it could definitely be a more, place differential race for sure.
What percentage do you think you should use Larson? Chris, we'll start with you.
So looking at the ownership projections, I'm not sure if that's going to be updated or not. Right now, it's looking like he's going to have massive ownership, and I'm not sure that can totally be justified personally for me because he is going to the rear because it's an added risk. If he was not going to the rear, I could maybe see the scenario where I'd want to play that much Kyle Larson because he could easily lead nearly half the race and win it, maybe even 3/4 of the race. But since he has to go through the field now, I would not mind being half that, maybe capping him at 25, 30% probably feels a bit fine for me. I wouldn't even hate being lower than that.
Are you kind of the same in terms of that cap number, Phill, of 25, 30%?
Right now, DraftKings, I'm sitting at about 50% Larson. If I stew on this a bit more, and if I've got a way to watch the truck race tomorrow afternoon, maybe I'll come down on that if I think that this race is gonna be a bit greener and play out differently. But when the field is going 50% or worse on Larson, that's generally a good jumping off point to try to go lower on the field.
We'll end on this question from Gabby of any Keselowski love Chris.
Yes, I do like Keselowski. I was mentioning earlier, I like the price point. Now, the thing is he's on a big dirt track, guys, so that's the only concern. But I like that starting point, starting in 20th, and Bristol is a pretty good track for him. He actually won the spring race here last year. Obviously, there was no dirt on the ground, so it's a much different scenario now, but he is purely a price play, and where he's starting makes him viable, in my opinion.
Phill, what's your take?
Yeah, Keselowski, for me, he needs this track to build up a bunch of rubber and for it to turn into just a slower version of itself. That will make him viable.
Of course, coming up here later on today at 5 o'clock Eastern time, it'll be the NBA Deeper Dive. Then following that will be NBA Live Before Lock. Do want to thank our sponsor, Monkey Knife Fight. Be sure to use the promo code Awesemo, and you'll get an instant first match deposit bonus of up to $50. Appreciate everyone tuning in here on a Sunday afternoon for the Awesemo NASCAR DFS Strategy Show. Good luck tomorrow. And of course, if you got any questions for the guys, be sure to hop up in our Slack channel. Those guys will get back to you. Talk to y'all next week.